Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Now it's been after almost 2 years since the tragic events of April 18th and 19th, 2020, and after two delays in the start of the proceedings, we are approaching the beginning of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings, which are scheduled to start on Tuesday, February 22nd. And so I wanted to give you a preview of what we can expect in the first couple of weeks of the proceedings. And then for those that are new to this, I'm going to give a breakdown of what I think are the three things we should be able to learn from these proceedings as they unfold over the coming months. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some recent developments that have taken place over the last week or so. If you're new to these posts, and some of you may be just as we're about to get started, it would be probably helpful for you to check out some of my other posts that I've made either in written form, these video posts, or else by podcast. I've got about probably 20 of them in the library, and they're pretty valuable, I think, as background pieces if you're trying to orient yourself to the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. These were originally supposed to start in October, and so that gave me an opportunity to really do some analysis pieces using my experience in the Desmond inquiry and some reading that I've done on inquiries generally. So some of the ones I'd recommend checking out early on, I did one on what can the Mass Casualty Commission actually accomplish, what's the legal foundation there. I did one on the list of participants and what that tells us about the Mass Casualty Commission hearings. I did one, drove through Portapique last October to do some hiking and just some reflections on the geography of the area. There's another one on the Mass Casualty Commission's unusual foundational document process. There's one on how the three commissioners might run the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. There are three commissioners, which is a little unusual. The next one I'd recommend is called A Compellable Witness, and this deals with the gunman's spouse, who was a key witness early on to the police, but we haven't heard really from since, but I think is a compellable witness, although she does have a criminal prosecution in her horizon. Policing Nova Scotia is another one. That's certainly going to be covered extensively in the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings, and so I lay some groundwork about how that is currently structured. And then the most popular one, I guess so far, it is over 1,600 views now, is one called What Will Happen in the Mass Casualty Commission Hearings if it is revealed that the gunman was a police agent. Now, there's been some speculation that that was the case, and reasons for that speculation. And then finally, what it means for the Mass Casualty Commission to be trauma-informed. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that too, but there's an individual post on that you may want to review. Talking about the schedule, the first 2 weeks have been released, although it's actually not 2 full weeks. The first week, there's just going to be proceedings on Tuesday and Wednesday. So on Tuesday, the opening day, there'll be opening remarks from the commissioners, and then there's going to be a panel on mental health and wellness, as well as a description of some of the resources that the Mass Casualty Commission has available for participants in the public. So the opening remarks, I'm going to be watching these very closely because there's been quite a bit of criticism in recent weeks, especially about the Commission and about the anticipated proceedings. And so I'm expecting or anticipating that the commissioners will respond to this criticism in their opening remarks. So I'll be watching that very closely. The other part is the panel on mental health and wellness, and what the commission states in their release from earlier or sort of late last week was that this panel is meant to normalize and validate the emotions people may be experiencing in the lead up to the proceedings, and also to help prepare people for what they can expect. Okay, so that's the first day. The second day, Wednesday, February 23rd, is going to have a panel on life in rural Nova Scotia, as well as a presentation on the structure of policing in Nova Scotia. Of course, you could just watch my video on that if you wanted to get the shorter version. But interestingly, the panel, as well as the panel for the first day, we still don't know who's going to be participating in those panels. So we'll wait to see who those individuals might be. And then the second week, February 28th through to Thursday, March 3rd, they list that there's going to be a presentation by Commission Council on evidence gathered on the Portapique portions of the events. So the events from that night, the roadblocks and such that were set up or attempted to be set up, and then just the situation around that geographical area. So we'll see what how that unfolds. That's the early schedule. The next thing I want to talk about are the top 3 things, in my view, that I think we will learn from the Mass Casualty Commission. And the first one I think is going to be the issue of policing Nova Scotia. And I've done an individual post on this, but the question I think is going to dominate at least the first portion of the proceedings. Currently in Nova Scotia, although policing is provincial jurisdiction, what we have, in fact, is a patchwork of municipal police forces and then areas primarily in rural Nova Scotia that are policed by the federal RCMP. So whether that still makes sense will be examined, no doubt. The role of Chief of Police of Nova Scotia, it doesn't appear that there is one, but that's in the Police Act that the Justice Minister has the authority to appoint a Chief of Police. The RCMP, who polices most of Nova Scotia, has a contract that extends until 2032, but there is a 2-year window or a notice period if the province wishes to cancel that contract. So certainly the RCMP has lots at stake in these proceedings if their performance is called into question in a serious manner that leads them to call for that contract to be reviewed. So we'll see. There's certainly issues on their communications with the public, allowing the gunman to escape the Portapique area, questions on that, and then calling in distant RCMP forces rather than the municipal forces in Truro and Amherst that were much closer in proximity. So lots of questions there to be answered. The second thing I think is going to come up is the emergency alert system. Of course, this was covered extensively at the time that the emergency alert system wasn't engaged by anybody. Now, the police knew the gunman's identification the night of the 18th, certainly knew the morning of the 19th that he was still on the loose, and yet no emergency alert was issued. So because such attention was paid to this issue at the time, people may presume that it's been taken care of, but it really hasn't been. There's really no change to the guidance online, at least, anything to do with legislation or regulations or public protocols, publicly available protocols, as to how that alert-ready system should be used in the case of an active shooter in particular, because the system seems designed for more to do with natural disaster events, but certainly, a situation as this would seem to call for the same kind of intervention. So that'll certainly be a topic. The third one is the trauma-informed approach that the Mass Casualty Commission is taking and how effective that might be. Now, this is an unusual approach for an inquiry to take. Normally, you would have the sort of traditional looking court situation where witnesses would be called, opportunities would be given to cross-examine those witnesses, and that would be the dominant format for the inquiry. The Mass Casualty Commission seems to be adapting that or adjusting that to what they call a trauma-informed, and incorporating things like roundtable discussions, community meetings, and such, where expert reports and panel discussions, rather than a traditional court process where there's witnesses called and then opportunities for parties to cross-examine. Now, this approach, of course, has some benefits, and it's been used in the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children inquiry, but it's also drawn lots of criticism, particularly in recent weeks, where many of the parties, including the main parties, don't feel like they've been given clarity on what their roles are going to be, whether they'll have the ability to cross-examine witnesses or suggest witnesses, or how exactly all of that is going to work. So that is a big question. If the trauma-informed approach is used as a way to avoid the difficult issues, and if it just becomes a series of presentations, as we're going to see in week 2, then I think that is going to undermine the legitimacy of this inquiry of the Commission, and so that could be a big problem. On the other hand, if it is done well, and if it works well and people are happy with it, we could see this being used as a model for future public inquiries. So those are the 3 things: the policing of Nova Scotia, the alert system, the emergency alert system, and then the trauma-informed approach. Of course, there's going to be many other issues discussed, but those to me are the main 3. Now that brings us to recent events, and I say there's been some criticism, and that has been recent. Patterson Law, who represents most of the most affected family members and individuals connected to the deceased victims, they've been quite critical of the Mass Casualty Commission in 2 letters. One that just came out this week, where here we are, days away from the beginning, and they still don't know how involved they're allowed to be, if they'll be able to cross-examine witnesses, what kind of things they'll be entitled to. And I say that in that they haven't even noted this one, which is, the commission is starting on Tuesday, and it is the commissioners, and just the commissioners, that are going to be making opening statements. Now, I've been involved in the Desmond inquiry, and every party made opening statements, and it really gives you a sense of where everybody wants to take things and what their perspectives are going to be, what areas they think are going to be important to examine. And I think it really situates the evidence in people's minds, make sure people know who's involved, and so by not allowing them or not inviting them to make opening statements, it really marginalizes the participants in a way that I really don't think is helpful or appropriate. But we'll see. Perhaps there'll be some initial couple of weeks of commission-led evidence or presentations, and then there'll be an opportunity, but that remains to be seen. The other letter was from Darcy Dobson, who is the daughter of Heather O'Brien, one of the deceased, and she's going to be an important witness, I think, in terms of the emergency alert system, because Miss O'Brien, as well as some others, certainly from the morning of the 19th, we can say with a lot of confidence, would not have left their homes if they had received an alert that there was a gunman on the loose and an active shooter. So those are going to be issues that are brought to the fore at some stage, and they've been the subject of recent criticism. Another one that came out just yesterday is this report from one of the 3 accused individuals. There's Lisa Banfield, her brother-in-law James Banfield, and then this Brian Brewster, who were accused of supplying the gunman with ammunition. Relatively minor charges in the whole context of things, because the police say also that they do not suspect that either of any of the 3 parties had foreknowledge of what was going to take place. So they were all charged summarily. Brian Brewster, through his lawyer Tom Singleton, has said that he wasn't given his right to counsel upon his second interview with the police. He was interviewed immediately on the day of the 19th, and then some months later, and wasn't given his right to counsel, even though it was clearly a police investigation. So we'll see how that turns out. To me, if we can accept Mr. Singleton at his submission, which I think we can, that the courts are likely to throw out that charge. I know James he's already pled guilty. James Banfield, and is going to be sentenced, I think, in the coming month or so, and then Lisa Banfield's trial is scheduled for in March sometime. So that'll all be taking place while the commission hearings are proceeding. I've done a post on this, and I'm of the opinion that those trials can proceed while the commission proceedings are underway, and there are legal protections in both cases, so that evidence from one isn't unduly prejudicial to the other process. So anyway, we'll see how all that unfolds. So that's my, I guess, an introduction or a preview for the opening week of the proceedings. It's been a long wait for the families to get this started, and everybody will be watching very closely to see what signs we get in the first day or two as to how this may unfold, whether we can have confidence in the process and other elements. So as the hearings begin, I'll be doing daily posts just to summarize what's taken place. They're not going to be as long as these other preview posts have been, but they'll be quick and to the point and try to summarize some of the highlights. As well, I'll be covering it on Twitter during the day, making posts as I think they're relevant to just keep people informed during the day as to what's been going on. So you can follow me there at Adam Rogers NS on Twitter. You can see all of this at adamrogers.ca as well, the videos, the blog posts, and links as well. So hope you found that helpful as an introduction, and if anything comes up in the meantime between now and Tuesday, I'll cover that somehow, but otherwise this is your preview for the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.